Welcome back to Sissy Maya. Make sure to subscribe to our channel to never miss an update. Additionally, consider subscribing to my Patreon to get access to these features, and much more. We continued eating while watching the other people settling in. We talked about the evening's program and listened to the musicians tuning up. Ethan even had a second helping of chicken and coleslaw. He must really enjoy my cooking. After finishing our meal and cleaning up, Ethan got up to toss out the trash. I took the opportunity to touch up my lipstick. When he returned, he sat down, stretching his legs out in front of him and leaning back. I lit the citronella candles to keep the bugs at bay and to set the mood for the evening. Then, after a brief hesitation, I sat down next to Ethan, curling my legs and resting my body against his. He stiffened for a moment, but then his arm shifted, pulling me closer, and I settled against him, with his hand resting gently on the ground next to my hip. As the lights dimmed, the crowd fell quiet. The music began, soft and cool, drifting through the night air. You could hear the audience snapping their fingers and lightly clapping along to the rhythm. The soloists performed their parts, and the applause came in waves. The music was incredible, everything from slow contemporary jazz to Dixieland, covering the full spectrum of jazz. The tempo shifted from fast and lively to slow, with deep, haunting melodies. The concert was moving, entertaining, and delightful. As it went on, I snuggled closer to Ethan, savoring the music with him. Before we knew it, the concert was over. The lights came on in the park, and the crowd stood up, applauding, cheering, and whistling. Ethan and I joined in, clapping until our hands were sore. As the applause faded, we folded up the blanket, extinguished the candles, and walked hand in hand back to the car. It took a little while to get out of the parking lot, but once we did, we drove off, chatting about the concert and discussing the various pieces that had been played. I pulled into Ethan's driveway and turned off the engine, taking a deep breath. "Sophia, I had such a great time tonight. The concert was a fantastic idea, and the dinner was delicious. I'm really glad you thought of it and asked me to come along." He smiled widely at me. "You're welcome, Ethan. I'm so glad you enjoyed it. I figured we've been working hard these past few weeks, and we deserved a little break, especially with all we still have to do next week." "You're absolutely right. Well, I guess I should be going. No need for you to walk me to the door. Good night, and thanks again." He unbuckled his seatbelt and began to open the door. "Ethan." He turned to look at me, and I took his hand in mine. I leaned forward and gave him a quick, soft kiss on the lips. "Good night." "Good night, Sophia." Ethan got out of the car and walked to his house. I watched him go, a slight smile on my lips, before heading home. Week 6. We were in the final stretch. Ethan and I, without discussing it, both arrived an hour early on Monday morning. I was a little surprised to see his car in the lot when I pulled in. Stepping out of the car, I smoothed my tan skirt, brushed an imaginary wrinkle from my maroon blouse, and headed inside. My tan 3-inch heels tapped rhythmically on the pavement as I walked in, swinging my purse slightly and smiling as I recalled the events of Saturday night with Ethan. He looked up as I entered. "Morning, Ethan." "Hey, Sophia." He smiled warmly as I sat down. "Thanks again for Saturday night. I had an amazing time. The concert was great, and the dinner, well, the dinner was fantastic." "You're welcome, Ethan. I'm so glad you had a good time. I had a great time too, and I'm really glad you could join me. It was fun. Now I'm going to have to go out and get some jazz CDs to add to my collection." I laughed. Finally, another convert. I grabbed the next file from the pile and got to work. Ethan just shook his head and returned to his file. We were in a different zone that morning, highly focused, driven by the ticking clock and the desire to finish the project properly and quickly. We didn't talk much, only exchanging words when we came across something unusual in the files. Lunch was brief, mostly because the deadlines had us energized and we were determined to finish. We plowed through a lot of the files, and by 3 p.m., I was sitting at the terminal,
inputting the data we'd pulled from the files. My maroon-tipped fingers flew across the keyboard, moving quickly as I worked. Occasionally, I glanced at Ethan, but he was deep in concentration on the file in front of him. By 6 p.m., I stopped typing, stretched my arms and shoulders. They were stiff and knotted from hours of sitting and working. I looked over at Ethan, who had a glazed look in his eyes. I could tell he had reached his limit. Ethan, let's call it a day. Sophia, I was just thinking the same thing. My brain is mush. I nodded in agreement. We packed up and headed out, but before leaving, we both took one last look at the pile of files. We weren't sure, but it felt like we'd made a significant dent in them today. We said goodnight in the parking lot, and I drove home, exhausted. I kicked off my heels as soon as I entered, padding to my room. I took a few minutes to change into my pajamas, remove my makeup, and then collapsed into bed. It was the deepest sleep I had in a long time. I woke up Tuesday morning, thankful I had set my alarm before falling asleep, or I might have slept the entire day away. I showered, did my hair and makeup, and got dressed for the day. I started with a pale pink bra and matching panties, pantyhose, and a slip. Then I grabbed a short-sleeved pink blouse from the hanger and buttoned it up over my slender torso, fitting it neatly around my figure. Next, I stepped into a charcoal grey skirt, pulling it up over my smooth calves and shapely thighs, and fastened it at my waist. The wool fabric hugged my hips but as I zipped it up. I completed the look with black pumps, added some jewelry, grabbed my purse and sunglasses, and headed out to the office. I got to the conference room before Ethan and began going through the first file in the pile. By the time Ethan arrived, I had made some progress. Good morning, Ethan. How's it going? Hi, Sophia. I'm doing okay. I got home last night and pretty much crashed. Didn't realize I was that tired. Ethan, I was the same way. I was so tired I could barely keep my eyes open. It's nice to know it wasn't just me. Yeah, Sophia, we've been working pretty hard. I'm just glad it's almost over. Totally agree. Just 4 more days. With that, we dove back into work. We quickly slipped into our usual routine, efficiently sorting through the files. Useless data was discarded, and relevant data was organized for input. We worked in silence, focusing on getting through the pile. Before long, it was clear we had crossed the halfway point, and the remaining files to review were fewer than those that had already been processed. After a quick lunch break, we returned to our work with renewed energy. We were about to start inputting at 3 p.m., as usual, when Claire walked in. I know I'm early for today's update, but I need to give my boss a full report in about an hour. So, how's everything going? Ethan spoke first. Claire, as you know, we usually run the report to show where we are. We haven't done that yet, but as you can see from the files, we'll definitely be done with reviewing and inputting by the end of the day tomorrow, probably even earlier. That soon? Claire looked visibly surprised. I agree with Ethan, Claire. We've gone through at least 90% of the files, maybe more. The remaining ones aren't a big challenge. The input will take some time, but it won't be difficult to finish. So, you'll be done tomorrow? Claire still seemed skeptical. Yes, Claire, Ethan said confidently. The review and input will be done tomorrow. That gives us Thursday and Friday, maybe part of Wednesday, to test the reports. We'll have plenty of time to make sure everything is perfect. Claire stood up, smiling. Great. I'll let David know the good news. Keep up the great work. With that, she left us to our tasks. So, Ethan, you really think we'll be done by tomorrow? Sophia, I'm certain we'll be finished by lunchtime. If we just keep reviewing tonight, we're on such a roll. Tomorrow morning, I'll start the input while you finish off the last files, and we'll be done by noon. I looked at what was left to do. Call it intuition, but I knew Ethan was right. I agree. We're on a great pace, and the motivation to finish will definitely push us tomorrow. Let's get back to it. We sat back down, energized and focused, knowing we were close to the finish line. We worked through the files with great speed, and by 6:30 p.m., we had reviewed all but 40. I could easily handle those tomorrow morning while Ethan did the input. We packed up, making sure everything was set for the next morning. We walked out of the building, got into our cars, and with a quick goodnight, we headed to our respective homes for the night. Nothing much awaited me at home that night, just some mail, mostly bills, and a few pieces of junk mail, which I quickly tossed aside. Since it was still light out and I was feeling a bit tense, I decided to go for a quick jog. I changed out of my work clothes into my running gear, stretched briefly, and started with a slow walk around the neighborhood, gradually picking up the pace into a steady run. The sweat pouring from my body helped release some of the tension from the day. As I slowed down to cool off, I felt much better, both physically and mentally. After a refreshing shower, I enjoyed a light dinner and spent the evening reading and watching a classic movie. By the time I headed to bed a few hours later, I was ready for a good night's sleep. Wednesday. Wednesday came like any other day. I got up, made sure my hair and makeup were perfect, and that my outfit, a purple silk dress and black patent leather pumps, was neat and ready. I left the house and headed to the office, where, as usual for this project, Ethan pulled up at almost the same time. We walked into the building together. Home stretch today, Ethan. Yep, Sophia. This is it. It should go smoothly. Ethan fired up the computer and prepped the data for input while I sat down, crossed my legs, and grabbed the first file for review. As Ethan worked, I noticed a subtle difference in our typing styles. His keystrokes were hard and forceful, as if he were trying to punch through the keyboard, while mine were lighter, likely due to my caution of breaking a nail if I didn't use the pads of my fingertips. The morning passed quietly, with only a brief restroom break between us. We didn't talk much, we were both fully focused on the task at hand. By 11 a.m., I had reviewed 32 of the 40 files, all neatly organized and ready for input. I was reaching for the 33rd file when Ethan spoke up. "All right, I'm done with my part. Now we just need to do today's review. Sophia, where are the files ready for input?" I gathered the reviewed files and brought them over to Ethan, deliberately placing them on the table with a loud thump. "Here you go, Ethan. Think you can finish these in an hour? Don't forget about the ones I still need to review." I gave him a wink and a big smile. "No sweat, Sophia. Watch and learn." Ethan cracked his knuckles dramatically like we'd seen in cartoons, then shot me a goofy grin and wink. I laughed and returned to my seat. Ethan's fingers were flying over the keyboard as I sat back down and started reviewing the remaining files. Every time I finished 2 files, I handed them to Ethan, and with each handoff, I saw a noticeable dent in the pile he had left to input. By the time I was finishing up the last file, Ethan came over to grab the 7th one for input. I handed him the final file as he saved his previous one. "Last one, Ethan, go for it." "Alrighty then. Sophia, here we go." I stood behind him, watching as he typed quickly and accurately. Leaning over his shoulder to make sure everything was going smoothly, he turned slightly to look at me and smiled. I smiled back and gave him a playful gesture to get back to work. His typing resumed, and I noticed a pleasant cologne scent lingering in the air. "Sophia." Ethan's voice pulled me from my thoughts. "Yes. Go ahead and click save, it's the last one. Ethan, you really know how to add drama to the moment. Thanks." I clicked the save button, and the computer hummed as it processed, displaying the message, "File successfully saved." There, everything was done. Ethan stood up and raised his palm. I automatically high-fived him, and then he surprised me by scooping me up into a bear hug and twirling me around the room. My skirt flew as I spun, and I wrapped my arms around his neck to steady myself. After 1.5 revolutions, Ethan gently set me back down. "Sorry about that, Sophia, got a little carried away there." "Ethan, that was totally understandable. I'll call Claire and let her know the good news." I picked up the phone and called Claire. When I told her we were finished, I had to hold the phone away from my ear to avoid being deafened by her excited screams. Within 5 minutes, Claire was in the conference room, her face glowing with excitement. "You did it. This is fantastic." She hugged both Ethan and me, then asked to see the results. Ethan and I pointed to the file cabinet where all the completed files were stored. Fortunately, I had just filed the last two during the few minutes it took Claire to come down. We also showed her that the section for files still to be input was completely empty. "Wonderful, this is beyond what we expected and even better than you predicted yesterday. Now all that's left is the reports, right?" "That's right, Claire," I confirmed. "Ethan and I will start running the reports after lunch and give them a thorough review." Claire seemed almost in disbelief. "This is amazing. I want to talk more about it, but I'm in the middle of something I need to get back to. You two go to lunch and start on the reports, and I'll check in with you later today." She practically ran out of the office after saying that. Ethan and I exchanged a surprised look as we processed Claire's reaction. With a shrug, we headed out for lunch. Despite it being as nice as the past few weeks, today felt perfect. With most of the pressure off, we were much more relaxed, and lunch was a pleasant, laid-back affair. We ate, talked about anything and everything, and simply enjoyed the moment. Afterward, we returned to the office and dove into the reports. While Ethan filed the last of the paperwork, I ran the input edit report, which would tell us if any data didn't meet the formatting requirements. It flagged about 50 errors, so Ethan and I went back and corrected them. Once that was done, we began running the summary and detail reports from the database, reviewing each one as we went. We cross-checked everything against the files to ensure accuracy. At 4:45, we were deep into our review when Claire returned, this time with a man. Ethan and I looked up as they entered, and the man introduced himself. "Sophia, Ethan, I'm David Somerset, Claire's boss. I had to come in and meet you both." He shook our hands and gestured for us to sit. "Claire has been telling me about your progress over the last 6 weeks, and I want to thank you both for all the hard work you've put in. I know this project was tough, but it was crucial, and your effort, including the overtime, is truly appreciated. We'll be sending a glowing letter of commendation to your staffing agency to let them know how pleased we are with what you've done. I also know you're both in school, and I wish you the best of luck with your studies. When you graduate, we'd love for you to consider working here. We already know you, and you've shown the right attitude and work ethic. Again, thank you for everything. I'll leave you now with Claire." He smiled, shook our hands again, and left. Ethan and I sat there in stunned silence for a moment, processing everything David had just said. Finally, Claire broke the silence. "I want to echo David's words. Both of you have worked incredibly hard these past weeks, and we really appreciate everything you've done. As a thank you, I'm taking you both to lunch tomorrow. But for now, you've had a long day, so go ahead and head out. And I don't want to see you two working more than 8 hours on Thursday and Friday." Ethan and I exchanged wide grins at that. I grabbed my purse from the desk drawer, and we all headed out of the office. Claire walked back to her office, waving us off as Ethan and I left for the day. "Sophia, I'm glad it's almost over," Ethan said. "Yeah, me too. And what Mr. Somerset said, it's great to know our work is really valued." "Yeah, and knowing we have a potential job offer after college is a nice bonus." "I agree, Ethan. We've been pretty lucky to have this experience." "I couldn't agree more. Have a good evening, Sophia." I got into my car, waved goodbye to Ethan, and headed home. Thursday morning, Ethan and I continued working on the reports, making sure everything was running properly and validating the results. We were making great progress when Claire walked in, ready to take us to lunch. I was dressed in a navy blue suit with a high-necked white blouse. When Claire arrived, I stood up, slipped on my jacket, grabbed my purse, and joined her and Ethan. We walked out to Claire's car, and she drove us to a nice seafood restaurant. Once there, we were seated and placed our orders. Claire started the conversation. "You two really did a fantastic job for us. As David mentioned yesterday, we truly appreciate everything you've done. Not only did you complete the work earlier and more accurately than we expected, but you also worked so well together personally. There were no personality clashes that slowed things down. That's true, Claire. Ethan's pretty easy to get along with, so it all worked out well, I said. The same goes for Sophia, Ethan added. But you two also managed to get along well outside the office, didn't you? I mean, you went to that movie a few weeks ago, right? That's right, Claire, and we also went to the baseball game the week before that. And last week, Ethan and I went to a jazz concert at the park, I added. Well, you two have been busy, Claire said with a smile. That makes this a little easier for me. She reached into her purse, pulled out a white envelope, and handed it to me. I looked at it curiously and then back at Claire, while Ethan sat silently, waiting. Claire explained. As an extra thank you, we've gotten you both a gift certificate for dinner at Chez Maurice, the best French restaurant in town. We've also made a reservation for you for Saturday night. I was taken aback. Claire, I don't even know what to say. Thank you so much. Wait, there's more, Claire continued. We've also included 2 tickets for Saturday evening for the big Broadway musical that's been running in town for the past 3 months. David thought a night of great food and entertainment would help compensate for all the hard work you've done. Thank you, Claire, Ethan said, his voice full of gratitude. I'm speechless. You both deserve it for everything you've done, Claire said, raising her glass in a toast. Thank you. We clinked our glasses and sipped, appreciating the gesture. The rest of the lunch was filled with light conversation about the restaurant and the musical. Afterward, we returned to the office to wrap up our work. As Ethan and I continued with our tasks that afternoon, I couldn't stop thinking about the dinner and the musical. After a while, I brought it up to Ethan. Ethan, I've got an idea I want to run by you. Sure, Sophia, what's up? Ethan looked up from his work. Well, since we have the dinner reservation and the tickets, why don't we make it a really special date? Get all dressed up and make it an unforgettable evening? That sounds amazing, Sophia. I'd love that. Ethan's face lit up with excitement. It sounds like a lot of fun. It's settled then. You pick me up at 4:30, we'll go to dinner, and then to the theater. It's going to be a wonderful evening. Ethan flashed the biggest smile I had ever seen from him. 4:30 it is, Sophia. I nodded, and we got back to work, the thought of our upcoming date lifting my spirits and seeming to improve Ethan's mood too. We made great progress on the reports. By 5 p.m., we wrapped up for the day, just as Claire had requested. I spent part of the evening going through my closet, trying to decide what to wear for Saturday night. I must have pulled out every outfit I owned about 5 times, struggling to choose. Eventually, I went to bed, my mind made up. Well, almost made up. Friday. Friday flew by as Ethan and I wrapped up the reports. We made a few final adjustments, burned the data and programs onto CDS for backup, and printed hardcopy reports for use. Claire came in at 4:30 to collect everything and to ensure we returned our security passes. Thank you both again for the outstanding job, she said. We truly appreciate everything you've done here. You're welcome, Claire, I replied. Ethan and I are really grateful for the opportunity to work here, and we can't thank you enough for the dinner certificate and play tickets. Claire smiled warmly. That was the least we could do. Thank you again, and good luck. She walked over to us, shaking our hands, then gave us both a hug. She walked us to the main lobby for the last time. Enjoy your evening on Saturday. Have a great time. Ethan and I walked across the lot in silence until we reached our cars. 4:30 tomorrow, right, Sophia? That's right, Ethan. I'll see you then. Good night. Good night, Sophia. We got into our cars and drove off, each heading home. I headed home and followed my usual routine, sorting through the mail, having dinner, and going for a jog, not necessarily in that order. Before bed, I spent a while rifling through my closet, trying on outfits multiple times, second-guessing my choice for the evening. After much deliberation, I finally went to sleep, though my mind kept racing. The next morning, I woke up with a rush of excitement about the evening ahead with Ethan. Over the past few weeks, we had grown quite close, and our previous dates had stirred feelings in me that I hadn't experienced before. I went through my usual workout, had a quick breakfast, and then showered. After stepping out, I slipped into a short terry cloth robe and grabbed my nail care basket. I started with removing the old polish, then used an orange stick to gently push back my cuticles. I took an emery board to smooth out any rough edges on my nails. Next, I picked a deep red polish and began applying it, starting with my left index finger. The color spread evenly across the nail, and I repeated the process for the rest of my fingers and toes. After the first coat dried, I applied 2 more layers, finishing with a clear top coat. The deep red gleamed as the sunlight streamed in through the window. I relaxed on the couch, enjoying the warmth of the day. After a brief, restless nap, I woke up and realized it was time to prepare. I ran a bath and added lavender bath salts, filling the air with a calming aroma. Before stepping in, I took off my chest forms and placed them on the counter, then removed my vaginal panty and set it aside. I freed myself, shifting my body and adjusting everything for comfort. With that, Robert was once again in control for a while. Stepping into the tub, I settled into the warm water and let the bubbles surround me. I washed with a bath sponge, relishing the sensation of the water on my smooth, hairless skin. I found a few stray hairs on my legs and arms, quickly removing them with Sophia's razor. After soaking for a while, I drained the tub, rinsed off, and shampooed and conditioned my thick blonde hair. I enjoyed the refreshing shower, letting the water cascade over me. Once finished, I towel-dried my hair, combed through the tangles, and got dressed. I put on the vaginal panty and adjusted it to create a smooth, flat front. Then, I attached the chest forms to my torso, letting the adhesive set before moving to the closet. As I walked across the room, I swayed my hips, feeling the weight of my chest forms as I moved. I wanted to be at my most feminine for the evening ahead. I pulled out a sheer, short white robe from my closet, feeling a thrill as the lace trimmed the lapels and sleeves. I tied the sash loosely, letting the satin material drape gently over my body, clinging slightly to my full chest. I slipped on white high-heeled mules, stretching my legs and pushing my chest forward as I walked. I sashayed to the vanity, where I took my time applying makeup, creating a dramatic, seductive look for the evening. I started with foundation, followed by a light dusting of powder. My red-tipped nails applied a rich blush to accentuate my cheekbones, choosing a deeper shade than usual for a more striking effect. Next, I focused on my eyes. I used dark shades of grey to blend over my eyelids, adding depth with eyeliner beneath my lashes. A coat of mascara curled my lashes, giving them an extra boost. I blinked a few times and admired the exotic, seductive look that had transformed my bright, crystal blue eyes. I finished by styling my hair, using a blow-dryer and brush to add volume. After several minutes, my blonde hair was perfectly shaped into a cute pageboy cut, framing my face and completing the look I had worked so hard to achieve. With my hair styled, I stood up to get dressed. I removed the white robe and slippers, then reached for the black bustier in my lingerie drawer. Slipping into it, I pulled the garment up my body and tightened the laces, flattening my already toned tummy and cinching my waist an additional inch or so, further enhancing my curves. I leaned forward slightly, letting my chest settle into the bra cups. Next, I retrieved the stockings from the dresser and returned to the vanity. I rolled one up and, resting my right foot on the vanity bench, I slowly unrolled the sheer fabric over my red-tipped toenails, making sure not to cause any snags. As I reached the top, I smoothed the stocking over my leg and attached the garters from the bustier, pulling them tight. I repeated the process for my left leg. Returning to the dresser, I grabbed a pair of black satin panties and pulled them up over the stockings until they rested comfortably at my waist. I gently ran my red-tipped fingers under the waistband to ensure everything fit properly. Next, I grabbed the showbox from the closet and returned to the vanity to sit down. As I bent my legs, The garters and stockings tightened, adding a touch of sensuality to the moment. I carefully removed the delicate black slingback pumps with a 4-inch stiletto heel from the box and slipped my stocking-clad right foot into the pointed toe of the shoe, securing the strap around my heel. I repeated the process with my left foot and swung my legs under the vanity. I glanced in the mirror and applied a red lip liner, outlining my lips. Then, I filled them in with the same brilliant red lipstick that matched my nails. After blotting them with a tissue, I smiled at my reflection, admiring my full, red, kissable lips. A quick look at the clock told me Ethan would be arriving soon. I added simple diamond stud earrings and a silver necklace, followed by 2 rings, one for each hand, and a delicate silver bangle on my right wrist. I stepped over to the closet and pulled out my dress for the evening. Slipping my high-heeled feet into the dress, I carefully pulled it up my smooth, shapely legs. The dress settled around my chest, and I zipped it up, tightening it to accentuate my figure. I made sure the spaghetti straps were in place and adjusted the dress until it sat just right. I admired myself in the full-length mirror with satisfaction. My blonde hair framed my face perfectly, my eyes were captivating, and my lips were full and red. The black mini dress hugged my figure, the plunging neckline accentuating my cleavage, and the low back showing off my smooth shoulder blades. The tight skirt clung to my legs and shaped my backside, while the high heels made my legs seem to go on forever. The doorbell rang, breaking my moment of reflection. I spritzed some Chanel No. 5 on my neck, grabbed my lipstick and perfume, and placed them in my black clutch. I draped my black wrap over my shoulders and walked to the door to meet Ethan. I paused, took a deep breath, and opened the door. There he was, looking exceptionally handsome in a white shirt, a red tie with a collar pin, and a black pinstriped suit. I gave him a warm smile. "Hi, Sophia. Wow, you look absolutely gorgeous tonight." "Wow." Ethan flashed his big grin at me. "Thank you, Ethan. I have to return the compliment, you look extremely handsome yourself." Thanks, Sophia. Are you ready to go?" He was actually blushing. I nodded, stepped outside, and locked the door behind me. I linked my arm through Ethan's as we walked to the car, where he opened the door for me. I took his hand as I sat down, swinging my legs inside. After closing the door, Ethan got into the car, and we drove off toward our destination. Our conversation was light-hearted, covering topics like the project we had just finished, going back to school, sports, music, and the play we were about to see. We bounced from one subject to another, laughing and enjoying each other's company. Time seemed to fly, and before I knew it, Ethan had pulled into the parking structure at the theater. He parked the car and got out, grabbing his coat. He put it on and walked around to open my door. After buttoning his coat, he extended his hand, and I placed my red-tipped fingers in his. I swung my legs out of the car, stepping into my stilettos. Ethan lifted my hand as I stood up, guiding me out of the car. I adjusted my dress and smiled at him. He looked absolutely dashing in his suit. Ethan smiled back and offered his arm. I eagerly slipped my arm through his, and we walked toward the theater. The rhythmic tap of my stilettos echoed as my hips swayed. The late afternoon sun was setting, and the temperature was comfortable. We made our way to the escalator, and I couldn't help but notice how much taller Ethan was than me. Even though I was a step higher, we were still eye to eye. We reached the final landing and walked arm in arm toward the restaurant. As a true gentleman, Ethan opened the door for me, and we stepped inside. After giving our name to the hostess, she led us to our table. Ethan pulled out my chair for me and helped me sit down before taking his seat. We opened the menu and were both amazed by the variety of dishes. We tried narrowing it down, but it was impossible. Finally, we settled on an appetizer sampler, 2 different entrees so we could share, and a selection of desserts. The atmosphere was perfect, soft, dim lighting created a romantic ambience, while candles on the table bathed our faces in a warm glow. The soft chatter of fellow diners added to the tranquility. We had an absolutely delightful meal. The food was exceptional, the ambience was just right, and our conversation flowed easily. Throughout the meal, our hands occasionally brushed, and we held them together for a few moments, capturing the magic of the evening. After finishing our meal, we left the restaurant with about 30 minutes to spare before the play started, so Ethan and I decided to take a stroll around the complex. I gathered my wrap around my shoulders as we wandered the promenade, hand in hand, gazing at the artwork in the galleries and window shopping. I leaned into Ethan as we walked, my stilettos clicking on the tiled floor, with the last hints of sunlight streaming through the atrium glass. With 10 minutes left before the show, we arrived at the theater. Ethan pulled the tickets from his pocket and presented them to the usher. We were given our programs and made our way to our seats, 10 rows from the orchestra pit, perfectly centered. As we settled into our seats, I removed my wrap, adjusted my dress, and crossed my legs, getting comfortable for the performance. We whispered about our seats as the orchestra began settling in, readying for the show. The lights dimmed, the orchestra started playing the overture, and the curtains rose. From the very first notes, the performance was magnificent. The music, the singing, the story, and the staging all came together to envelop the audience. Aside from applause after songs, the theater was silent as everyone was mesmerized by the performance. I was moved by the dramatic moments between the heroine and the lead, and I found myself wiping away a tear. At the emotional climax of the production, my fingers intertwined with Ethan's. As the final curtain fell, the audience erupted in applause, the theater shaking with the noise. The lead actors took several curtain calls as the applause grew louder each time. As the lights came up, Ethan and I made our way out of the theater. I felt a lump in my throat as we walked hand in hand toward the car. Ethan, that was incredible. I don't even know how to describe it, but I'm in awe, I said. I agree, Sophia, Ethan replied, his voice full of emotion. That was a performance like no other. I could tell you were moved by it too. No doubt, Sophia. I got a bit teary-eyed there at the end, Ethan admitted. We reached the car, and Ethan opened my door, helping me in. Once inside, he started the engine and popped in a CD of the play's music that we had bought on our way out. As we drove, the familiar tunes filled the car, and my hand rested gently on Ethan's as we made our way through the streets. As the last notes of the tragic love song played, we arrived at my driveway. Ethan got out and opened my door, offering me his hand. I swung my legs out of the car, my stiletto heels clicking on the ground as I rose, taking Ethan's hand. He walked me to the door, and I unlocked it with my keys. I turned to face Ethan, smiling softly under the porch light. This has been a wonderful evening, Ethan. I'm so glad we could share it, I said. Me too, Sophia. I'm really glad we've gotten to know each other this summer. Me too. I took a step closer to Ethan, wrapping my arms around his neck and pulling him toward me. Tilting my head back, I felt his arms slip around my waist as he leaned down. Our lips met in a soft, deep kiss, filled with tenderness. For a moment, we parted, only to come together again with more passion, more intensity. I felt Ethan's tongue gently press against my lips, and I parted them, allowing him in. Our tongues danced together, exploring each other, as our bodies pressed closer. We moaned softly, the kiss growing deeper and more urgent. When we finally pulled apart, I slid my hands down Ethan's chest, and he loosened his grip around my waist. Our hands met, and we stood there for a moment in silence. Good night, Ethan, I whispered. Good night, Sophia. I stepped back, entering the house and locking the door behind me. As I walked upstairs, I thought about the unforgettable evening and everything that had happened this summer.